Welcome, friends. In our talk on October 2nd, we gave an overview of the important discoveries of the Dead Sea Scrolls in the 1940s. They are believed to have been recorded near the start of the first century AD. We noted that we would have further talks on the Gospels themselves. On February 5, 2023, there was a first such talks on both February 5 and the October 2nd talk. Both of them are on our website, www.ultdc.org. Today there will be another talk on the Gospels and a question and answer period. Then from 12:05 to 1, we will continue our discussion on the Bhagavad Gita. But first, there will be a presentation of the Declaration of ULT and our devotional reading. Another student will get that, and just a brief overview of the fundamentals. The Declaration. We and the other ULTs throughout the world are united in making the purest teachings of Theosophy available for each person to check, test, and verify as we make the Theosophy a living power in our lives and spread the original teachings. We endeavor to uplift ourselves by embodying these teachings and passing them on as we found them. The Declaration is our sole guide and remains as it was when Mr. Crosby and others established ULT in 1909. It says, the policy of this lodge is independent devotion to the cause of Theosophy, without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the Theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and lofty to leave it the time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of Theosophy and the exemplification in practice of those principles through a true realization of the self, a profound conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds at the unassailable basis for union among Theosophists, wherever and however situated, the similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers, the sole bond between its associates being that basis. And it aims to disseminate this idea among Theosophists in the furtherance of unity. Theosophists we figure that they are all engaged in the true service of humanity without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization. And it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its purposes and who desire to fit themselves by study and otherwise to be the better able to help and teach others. The true Theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. Another student is going to read from the Voice of the Silence, our devotional reading this today, starting on page 59.
Okay. Well, the more those thus advance, the more their feet pursuits will meet. The path that leads on is lighted by one fire. the light of dying, burning in the heart. The more one days, the more he shall obtain. The more he wears, the more that light shall pale, and that a lamp can light. That a lamp can, for as the lightning sunburn that on the top of some tall mountain shines, is followed by the black night, when out it fades, so its hurt light. When out it goes, a dark and threatening shade will fall from time on herd upon the path and root the feet in terror to the spot. Beware, disciple, of that lesson shade. No light that shines from spirit can dispel the darkness of the nether soul, unless all selfish thought has fled therefrom, and that the pilgrim says, I have renounced this passing frame. I have destroyed the cows. The shadows cast can as effects no longer be. For now the last great fight, the final war between the higher and the lower self, has taken place. Behold, the very battlefield is now engulfed in the great war and is no more. But once that thought has passed the gate of shanty steps, the thought is taken. The body is thy slave. Now for the foes prepare the portal of temptation which do ensnare the inner man. As those can snare that goal, before silent hand is lifted to appraise the false gate's latch. Those must have mastered all the mentioned changes in the self, and slain the army of the thought sensations that subtle and insidious creep unasked with the soul's bright shine. If those would not be slain by them must then harmless make their own creations, the children of my thoughts, unseen, impalable that swarm round humankind, the pregnancy and hers to man and his terrestrial spoils. Those has to study the voidness of the seeming foul, the fullness of the seeming void. O fearless aspirant, look deep within the well of them own heart, and answer, nor is those of self the power, or those perceiver of external shadows.
Thank you. If thou dost not, then thou art lost. So that's we touch on the fundamental propositions of theosophy and nature, which you find in every aspect of nature and the propositions presented in it. Page 14, volume 1. The secret doctrines is based on three fundamental principles which act as one together. First, there is the ever-present, eternal, and boundless principle that extends beyond human understanding. It is beingness rather than being, and is thought of as the great breath. The one reality, dynamic energy, the rootless root, the causeless cause, and might be thought of as the source of that small, unselfish voice that's welled up within the individual that your mother probably always told you about. Spirit, matter, life, the spirit of the universe, we are all invited to participate in what we can partake of what we can at our stage of development. The second fundamental law involves the absolute universality of that law of periodicity, of flux and reflux, of ebb and flow, which physical science has observed and recorded in all the departments of nature. Day and night, life and death, sleeping and waking are facts so common, so perfectly universal, and without exception, that it is easy to comprehend that in it we see one of the absolutely fundamental laws of the universe. Without the law, or many this law of cycles, and then we have the laws of karma and reincarnation in that too. The third fundamental is on evolution. It's a cycle of incarnation and necessity. No spiritual Buddhi or divine soul can have an independent, conscious existence before the spark from its essence has passed through every eternal form and has acquired individuality, first by natural impulse, then by self-induced and self-devised effort, checked by karma. From the mineral and plant up to the holiest archangel, or Diane Moon. So now we're going to have the talk on the Gospels.
Thank you. Today we'll continue with the talk about Gospels, but I promise that today we will go deeper into the Gospels themselves and into the belief of the Gnostics that produced these writings. I promise it will be very interesting, surprising, maybe shocking if you're not familiar with their theology. First, I want to come back a little bit to the 2nd century Christianity and 2nd century overall, what was happening at that time in the Israel. The Gnostic Gospels were found in 2 major discoveries. One Nag Hammadi library and one Dead Sea Scrolls. So the Nag Hammadi library is considered to be one of the greatest discoveries, archaeological discoveries of the ancient scripts ever. A little bit about the Nag Hammadi library. We talked about already Dead Sea Scrolls. Nag Hammadi library had a quite shocking history. It was found in the 50s and in Egypt, and when it was found by a local farmer, he was farming, and he found something underneath the earth, and it was a pot in which the scripts were preserved. He realized that there may be some value to the scripts, so he brought it home. Now the shocking part of history of Nag Hammadi library, unfortunately, he was in the feud with another villager, and as part of the revenge, he killed the man, and he ended up in prison. So he was imprisoned, and he left all of the clay pots with Nag Hammadi scrolls back home. While he was in prison, the winter months got a little chilly, so his mother was burning the stove and cooking and heating with Nag Hammadi scrolls. So a big part of the library disappeared in the fire, basically cooking the meals for this villager woman who did not know the value. So that's how a big part of the history and our understanding of Gnosticism disappeared, but much was preserved. Nag Hammadi library consists of 13 leather volumes and about 50 texts. The part that was preserved was also in a fairly bad shape, so there was a very intense restoration done to the Nag Hammadi library, but basically all what we know about Gnosticism, aside of the criticism and anti-Gnostic writings by the Orthodox Christian writers, is from these 2 libraries. When you read the Gnostic Gospels themselves, you can see that sometimes words are missing, sometimes sentences are missing, and it just takes, at times, the historians just reconstruct what the meaning may have been. Now, going back to 2nd century, there were 2 major movements of Christianity that are emerging. One is proto-orthodoxy, that later developed during Nicene Creed into orthodoxy, and heresy. At that time, heresy was not considered something evil, but it was other than proto-orthodoxy. So basically, there was one major forming line of Christianity that was proto-orthodoxy, and one of the large proponents were the Justin the Martyr, the erroneous, and everything else. So the Christianity was very polemic. There was orthodoxy and heresy was basically everything else. And it was very, very multifaceted and very polemic.
there are three major branches that emerged at that time. There was Jewish Christianity, so more of a Christianity based on Judaism that did not separate itself from Judaism. It was basically a branch of Judaism. The orthodoxy and the Gnosticism. And what is interesting, that Gnosticism did not exist as a movement. There was no even word Gnosticism. It was invented by the historians of 20th century. It was more of a school of thought and polemic thought on Christ and his teachings. So the Gnosticism would be even incorrect word to use in describing that movement. It was literally a very polemic school of thought that included both the Platonic cosmology, Judaic Kabbalistic beliefs, as well as more mainstream Christian. So it was a very, very mixed bag. The orthodoxy, the sort of main proponent of orthodoxy in Christianity could be called the erroneous. And the founder of the heresy movements was Simon Magus. And what is happening later in the 3rd, 4th, 5th century, and especially after the agreements made at the Nicaea in Turkey, basically the heretic Christians become the largest evil and opponents of the orthodoxy. That there is no greater tension between any religion than the Gnostics and the Orthodox Christians. And when you look, there are some similarities, some differences, but once again, those who are close fightfuls, those who are too far apart, probably don't care about each other. So that became the case later in history. And as a result of this tension, basically it was one of the most successful elimination of school of thought. That in the Gnostic teachings and scripts were eliminated, burned, extinguished, or buried into the ground. And all what we know of them is basically these two major scrolls, Nag Hammadi and Dead Sea Scrolls. That's why it's considered to be one of the greatest discoveries, because it is one of the most successfully eliminated school of thought. That we know more about the Platonic school of thought, we know more about the different ancient beliefs, but Gnosticism was very thoughtfully eliminated and hidden, that very little survived and came to us. So now we came to the understanding of Gnosticism as a school of thought, and some of these things that should be mentioned in a context is the myth of apostolic succession. And what it means that the apostolic succession is a myth. In Christianity, there is a belief that the Christ transferred its knowledge to the apostles, and apostles are the ones who wrote canonical gospels. And that's why they're canonical, and that's why we have them in the New Testament. This is a myth. In fact, all of the canonical gospels were not written by the apostles. Maybe there were at some point, but not one written by apostles survived, because everything that we have and that was dated on ancient scrolls dates much later, when they could not have been alive. So we don't have one version of the canonical gospels that date to the time of apostles. So we don't know whether they ever wrote anything, it was oral tradition, or they wrote something at a later time. But basically, the apostolic succession, that what Christ was speaking was recorded by apostles and recorded in the canonical scripture, is a total myth. The second one is the myth that Christianity was linear. Actually not. There are many, many different branches, and those who were more organized in terms of institutional structure as well as financially dominated, and those who were more in a way democratic disappeared, because they did not have that sort of organizational and financial structure to embed themselves in the Roman Empire. The main movements of Gnostics, again, Gnostics is just what we call this movement now, but at that time there was a movement of Valentinians. Valentinus was a very prominent Gnostic. He was even proposed to be a bishop in the Christian church. That didn't happen. And the other name that they used was Sethians. So it was a Sethian Christians. And anyone familiar with the Seth? Why would they call themselves Sethians? No
I
one?
know.
No. This is very interesting. So why they call themselves Sethians? Because Adam and Eve had children. Who were the children of Adam and Eve? Any recollection? Or you must know.
Who were the
Children of Adam and Eve.
I don't, not off the top of my head.
Right. Children of Adam and Eve were Cain and Able. Of course. Now, they also had another child, and that child's name was Seth.
Hmm.
Now, the Gnostics believed that Abel and Cain were not born from Adam. And that's when it gets interesting. That Eve was actually conceived, Abel and Cain, from Demiurge, who was a god, but not real god. We'll get to this later. And their joint real son, the earthly son, was Seth. So the Gnostics believe that we as humans are descendants not of Abel and Cain, but of Seth. And the whole lineage of Abel and Cain is basically as misnomer. So that's why they call themselves Sethians. We'll get to later to this when we examine the major beliefs of the Gnostics. But this is basically what we talked in the previous talk, a little bit about the environment and what was happening. So there's Jewish Christianity, more Judaic. There is very different schools of thought of Gnosticism, and there is a birth of proto-orthodoxy that survived till today and became predominant religion. The only thing I can compare it to the annihilation of the Neanderthal. To that extent, the Gnostic thought was eliminated. Now I want to mention the Gnostic Gospels that survived in the Nag Hammadi library. We will talk about some of them today in more detail, and in October we will really examine maybe one or two. So there is a Gospel of Thomas, there is Gospel of Truth, Gospel of Philip, in fact, Gospel of Peter, the Gospel of Mary, that many may be familiar because the Gospel of Mary was very well publicized and was quite thought-provoking. There is Gospel of the Lord, there is Proto-Gospel of James. There is a very interesting series of Gospels that are called Infancy Gospels of Thomas, the Gospels about Jesus being a child. There is Gospel according to the Hebrews, Gospel of the Ebionites, Gospel of Judas, and Apocryphon of John. So you can see there's an enormous body of scripts that never made it in the four canonical Gospels or any biblical text. They're not even being discussed. They're completely outside of Christianity, but they do all exist, and they have a wealth of knowledge and information and hold lots of similarities. I wouldn't even call similarities, but lots of resonance with the Theosophical movement, the Theosophical thought. Now, what did they believe as a most fundamental principle? They believe in dualistic anthropology and dualistic
The nuclear place, yeah.
Cassie? Cassie, I think you're not on mute. Okay, so on dualistic anthropology, they were very strong dualists. They believed that there is a material and physical world, and we exist as humans in the physical world, and there is a spiritual realm, and we also exist in that spiritual realm. And on the dualistic theology, this is where it gets very interesting, because they believe that there is a completely spiritual realm of universes, and there is this physical world. And the most fascinating departure from the mainstream Christianity was that this material world was not created by God. It was created by another being, Demiurge, that was in error. So the entire physical world came in existence as a result of an error. And the God of Judaism, the Father God that we read in the Old Testament, is actually not a God. It is that Demiurge who creates earth in the error. So we are in complete forgetting of who we are, in complete forgetting whom we worship and who is the divine being. So this is, and you can see how this departure stands in a complete confrontation with the proto-orthodoxy and what we know today, that we cannot even assume that the God who created the earthly realm and who is the God of the Old Testament is actually an error. That we need to we need to open our eyes on and return back to the true divine. And that happens through knowledge, through a secret knowledge of material universe and of the divine realms that comes through a process of gnosis, of understanding. And the gnosis also existed in Hermetic teachings, so it was maybe borrowed from Hermetism, maybe existed parallel, but the knowledge of physical world and the divine realm is necessary to understand that everything we think and see is actually an error. Now we'll go deeper into the theology, and that's where it gets extremely fascinating. I'll try to explain it to the best of my abilities as it gets quite complex. In Gnostic school of thought, the spiritual world and the fullness of all universes of spirit were called pleroma. So there is a pleroma that is all encompassing. This is basically a divine realm, and it consists of literally endless and landless universes. Then there is pneuma, that is a spirit or something material, a substance that is embodied in the material. Above all of the things in the pleroma, in that divine existence, there is a Father. And you can't even say Father is inside, he's outside. Father is also called the monad. He's also called in the one. And he's also called the invisible spirit. So this is the Father. There is some absolute divine realm that we cannot understand. And at the top of this is the Father, who is the monad, the one, the invisible spirit. And now I will read a description of what they meant by this. And this will come from the secret book of John. The one is the invisible spirit. We should not think of it as a God or like a God, for it is greater than a God, because it has nothing over it and no Lord above it. It does not exist within anything inferior to it, since everything exists within it, for it established itself. It is eternal, since it does not need anything, for it is absolutely complete. It has never lacked anything in order to be complete by it. Rather, it is always absolutely completely in light. The one is illimitable, since there is nothing before it to limit it. Unfathomable, since there is nothing before it to fathom it. Immeasurable, since there was nothing before it to measure it. Invisible, since nothing has seen it. Eternal, since it exists eternally. Unutterable, since nothing could comprehend it to utter it. Unnameable, since there is nothing before it to give it a name. It literally gives it chills, because this is the first fundamental principle of theosophy. This is the source that existed, that not been created, that existed, that is incomprehensible, that is always there, and it's unnameable. So that's the Father of the Gnostic Christians. Very different from the Christian Father of the Trinity. And he's called monad, the one, the invisible spirit. Now, the nature of the pleroma and the Father gets even more complex and interesting, because the pleroma, that spiritual realm, consists of eons. And there are many, many different eons. And each eon is almost a spiritual universe of its own. It's very hard for us to understand with our limited knowledge, but basically the pleroma of spiritual realm, that is the Father, the One, can also basically expresses itself in eons. And what is interesting, that eons can be of feminine or masculine nature. And the description of the eons is as following. The eons that make up the entirety result from the invisible spirit's knowledge or thought of itself. There are its thinking or its intellect in all its complexity. So eons are thinking and the intellect of the One, of the invisible. So they are in a way expression of him. They form also a spiritual realm, the equivalent of Plato's realm of ideal forms. For the Gnostics, the entirety that the eons constitute is truly real and eternal. The material world is flawed imitation of the entirety and destined to perish. Now it gets even more interesting. The very first eon that emanates from the Father, from the monad, is Barbelo. So we have the One, I'll call the One, it's easier. And the first eon emanation is Barbelo. And the very first eon, it's considered to be the first principle in the Gnosticism. The first principle in the Gnosticism is emanation of Barbelo out of the One. Barbelo is a feminine, and she is the forethought. She is the first forethought of the invisible and omnipresent. And she is also called a universal womb. So she is the first material. So Barbelo is not a form yet. Barbelo is a feminine emanation of the invisible spirit, the One, that contains all possibilities of material reality. As fascinating as this sounds. And here's a description of Barbelo, and this is from the Secret Book of John. The invisible spirit's thought became a reality. And she who appeared in his presence in shining light came forth. She is the first power who protected everything and came forth from his mind and the forethought of the all. Her light shines like the Father's light. She, the perfect power, is the image of the perfect and invisible Virgin Spirit. She, the first power, the glory of Barbelo, the perfect glory among the eons, the glory of revelation, she glorified and praised the Virgin Spirit, for because of the Spirit she had come forth. She is the first thought, the image of the Spirit. She became the universal womb, for she precedes everything. So this is the Secret Book of John. Now there is Barbelo that is not fully material, but she is the first form of the One. Then it gets even more interesting, because as part of this dyad, there is Christ. Christ, also called the Logos. So Christ, in a way, is a child of the invisible One and Barbelo. The best way that the student can come to comprehending what Christ is, it almost feels like a fohat. It is what connects that universal One, the material beginning of possibility, together. So it is the result of that invisible spirit and possibility of the material world. It's this connector that holds them together. But that's the triad.
That's full high.
That it feels like Foha, because basically the Christ is born out of the invisible spirit, the one, and Barbello, that is the forethought of reality. So it's holding material and spiritual together. He is the one that embodies both. So this is the Trinity of the Gnostics. The invisible spirit is the Father, Barbello is the Mother, and Christ is the Son. Now it gets even more interesting. I promise this will challenge anything you knew before. One of the eons, now there are many eons, there are very different spiritual realities, and you can call them gods within the God. So one of the eons is called a name that is familiar to you, Sophia, the wisdom. So one of the eons is Sophia. She is the wisdom, and she holds that wisdom nature in her where she can create. She is the power of creation because she is the wisdom. She has wisdom where she can conceive things. And Sophia wanted to create something of herself. She envisioned that she has the wisdom to create something. She wanted to come into the creative potential and not just exist in the pleroma of the divine possibility and also Barbello, that is a womb of reality. Sophia decides that she can create something of herself, and she can do it without consenting with the spirit, with the invisible one. She can create it of herself, but she is just emanation of the one. She's not the one. She is emanation, so she's one of the expressions, and she wants to create something in her own image. And I will read now about wisdom. Awesome. Secret book of John, what she creates. She, Sophia, wanted to bring forth something like herself without the consent of the spirit, who had not given approval, without her partner and without his consideration. The male did not give approval. She did not find her partner, and she considered this without the spirit's consent and without the knowledge of her partner. Nonetheless, she gave birth. So Sophia gives birth of herself. In a way, it is a virgin birth, because as it says, she did not consent with the male principle of the pleroma. She gives birth to Yaldabaoth. Yaldabaoth is born in the body of a snake with the head of the lion. And he is so distorted. He looks nothing like what Sophia thought she will create. Her creation gone wrong. And Sophia hides Yaldabaoth. He also called Saklas. When Yaldabaoth is born, he is born as a demiurge. This is the terminology in demiurge. Demiurge. Demiurge basically means he is divine. He is born of the Sophia, who is the eon. But demiurge is not the God conceived within the one, an invisible spirit. So that's why he is God, but he is not divine within the invisible spirit, because she did not consent with the invisible spirit. She gave birth of her own. And he is sort of this God created in error. Now, Yaldabaoth, since he is also the divine demiurge, what does he do? What anybody has any guesses what Yaldabaoth did? He creates the earth. He creates us. He becomes the God of the Old Testament. He is the Yahweh. But actually, he is not, because he is not connected to the one and the invisible spirit. He creates the earth in his very distorted vision of what pleroma is, because he only knows one side of the from Sophia. He'd never been part of the invisible spirit. So he creates the earth, the humans, Adam and Eve, and all of this is done in error. The only one who is not in error in all of this horrible mess is Christ, the Logos, because Christ is more of the one than Barbell. And he is the one sent to earth to tell people that they need to not follow the entire theology of the demiurge, but to return to the one. So the mission of Christ is to come to earth and open their eyes on the invisible one and the pleroma and the true principles of the existence. And he does it through knowledge and not through dying on the cross. So that's another big divergence, that dying on the cross really doesn't do anything. He comes to bring the knowledge that we are blinded by the material world that is created by not even a God. That we believe is created by God, but it is not. It's created by Yaldabaoth, that was a creation of Sophia in her own limited wisdom of what material world can be. So with this, we can conclude that basically the major belief of Gnostics is that entire material world is created in a grave error. And this is when Eve and Adam are created. They have Abel and Cain. And actually, Abel and Cain are not children of the Adam. They're conceived from Yaldabaoth. That Eve, just like Mary, conceives from Yaldabaoth and gives birth to these two children. And the true son of Adam and Eve is Seth. That's why they call themselves Sethians. And demiurge, also another meaning of demiurge, who was Yaldabaoth. He's a craftsman. He does things in the image of pleroma, but it's very imperfect. He's not an artist. He's really a craftsman. And he thinks, another very interesting moment is that he thinks that he is the only God. And when you read Old Testament, the main point is, I am the only God. And there is no doubt in that. Now, if there are no other gods, why would you even speak of this? Can you think of invisible one saying that I'm the only God and there is no the other one? No, he's been before, he's after, he's unnameable, he's omnipresent. So it's clear that you have to say that I am the only God. There must be others, so I need to fight my territory. So he does, Yaldabaoth beliefs, makes others to believe that he's the only God, and he proceeds creating the world in his image and in his memory of pleroma. And now we have Christ, who comes to open our eyes to this. So this comes to the next reading. On Gnosis, how we can return back to the one. The Gnostic believed that the human intellect could experience Gnosis, that is, acquaintance with God within this mortal life, however fleetingly. They portrayed this experience primarily as an ascent to higher knowledge that was both intellectual and cosmic. Intellectually, the Gnostics could ascend by contemplating increasingly abstract levels of existence, starting by understanding one's own existence and that of other lower divine beings, advancing to the contemplation of higher eons, ultimately the Barbello, and attempting to gain some imperfect acquaintance within the ineffable first principle, the invisible spirit. So this is the belief behind the Gnosis. Now we will go a little bit over the other terminology used by Gnostics. I hope this is self-explanatory.
Sure is.
But what is really fascinating that unless you study Gnosticism and read the Gnostic text, no one ever heard really of this. This is like, what in the world is that? So the other terminology used by Gnostics is they determine three types of human beings. That all human beings are divided in three categories. And one category is called heilig, maybe heilig, I don't know how to pronounce heilig.
Yeah, we will fill that out when I have trouble with it.
Heilig, yeah. Heilig. Heilig means material. So those people who are born into material realm that are of material nature. So heilig means that they are material, they like to be in their matter, and they are not yet ready for the gnosis of the spiritual realms. The second type of people are psychic. Psychic literally in translation means ensouled. Ensouled. So they do have the pneuma in them. Pneuma is the spirit that descends in the material. So they're ensouled. They have certain abilities. They are connected to the spiritual world. The third category is pneumatic. Pneumatic. And they're the ones who consist of pneuma. Pneuma is the spirit. Those are the spiritual ones that are closer to understanding the true invisible one, Barbello, and the pleroma of the divine existence. So this is the three categories. So when one reads Gnostic texts, they very often appear there. So it's sort of good to be familiar with it. And it's very similar, I would say, to reading Secret Doctrine. Unless you know the terminology, it doesn't make sense. You have to familiarize yourself with this terminology. What is pneuma? What is pleroma? What are the aeons? There are also archons. Archons, the rulers of the material worlds. What are these three different types? It does mostly comes from the Platonic school of thought. And they are not being translated in English or any other languages because they are so difficult to define that basically linguists and historians said it's best to keep the terminology as is because we don't know how to really describe it in other languages. So, but this is just a little bit more on terminology. Now we will go over some main gospels, just few words about the categories of gospels. And then in October, we'll go and actually read definitely the Gospel of Judas. And I have a wonderful book here. I'm just reading Gospel of Judas by Elaine Pagels. So some of the most prominent Gospels that most people are familiar with probably would be the Gospel of Thomas and Gospel of Mary. Gospel of Thomas is fairly early script. It was dated to 60s, 70s after death. And Gospel of Thomas is written by Didymus Thomas. So in the Gospel you can read that Didymus Thomas is writing about this and that and Jesus and his teachings. Didymus means twin. And in the Gospel of basically Gospel of Thomas is claimed to be written by a twin brother of Jesus. Not his divine brother. No, Mary had other children with Joseph. And when Christ was born, there was another boy born who was a human, who was not God. So he was born from Joseph. So his name was Thomas. That's why he is called Jesus' twin, but he is his physical twin. Probably also never heard about that. I see some of the smiles about this. But there is a gospel written by the twin brother of Christ who says, I am a man, and I became his disciple. We'll work together. I was born of Joseph, and Christ was born of the divine source. Some of the interesting themes in the Gospel of Thomas is the notion of the kingdom. Like there is in the canonical Gospels, it's called eschaton, the next coming of Christ. That in some Gospels the Christ is coming in thousands of years to save us. In some it's imminent. Some Christians were expecting it that he will be here tomorrow. It didn't happen. And in Thomas, he says the kingdom of God is here and it's always been here. The Christ is not coming back. He's always here. And his kingdom and this divine realm of pleroma is here. We just choose to perceive the error. So that's one of the main themes. The second one is the salvation achieved through gnosis and through understanding that we're living in the error and we need to open our eyes on the kingdom of God that is here. So we need to understand and see the crucifixion of Christ will not rescue anyone unless you do not work with yourself. And that's a very important notion of Gnosticism, is self-responsibility, that you have to work on self and understanding self and the reality to be able to see the kingdom of God. And he also talks about the androgen divinity that is both female and male. That's also quite different, because what the proto-orthodoxy is basically the invisible, the spirit, the Father, the Son, the all males. The next gospel that many are probably familiar is Gospel of Mary. The Gospel of Mary was found in Egypt, and it was found in the dung. So literally there was a dump of some kind of ancient scripts, and it was picked up from that dump and rescued. And in Gospel of Mary, we see her being as a partner of Jesus and almost like a divine persona, similar to Sophia, or I would say similar to Sophia, the emanation of divine that is feminine. The Gospel of Mary, she also writes a lot about the secret gnosis, secret knowledge that was shared by Christ just with her. She does talk about the role of women in Christianity as well. So it is quite interesting. The other fascinating gospel is the Gospel of Peter. The reason it's fascinating because when the text was examined, the script itself, scripture was examined, it predates every canonical gospel we have. So this is the oldest gospel in the possession of humanity, the Gospel of Peter. It's not in the Bible, it's not considered to be canonical, it's not part of the teachings, but it is the oldest gospel that we have. So it's quite fascinating that that we have access to that, but it's not really being part of the Christian movement. Then there's also Gospel of Truth. Gospel of Truth is dated before 180. So it's a little bit later. It was attributed to Valentinus, but most likely Valentinus did not write it. It's written in original Greek, but we have only version that survives in Coptic. But there are some references that it was written in Greek. The Gospel of Thomas is very esoteric. Like once you read it, it's literally like, what is it talking about? And this is where knowing the terminology is very helpful, because one of the main themes of Gospel of Thomas is search for the Father, search for the invisible one, and trying to understand the monad, the omnipresent principle. So it's really very, very esoteric. The other theme is deliverance from ignorance and how to overcome the ignorance and illusion of the material world. The other gospel that survived is the Gospel of Philip. It talks about, again, salvation through knowledge. This is where the bridal chamber of Christ is explored, that makes it in the Rosicrucial movement and Rosa Mundi. And it also looked at the relationship of Christ and Mary. And again, Christ and Mary are taken more esoterically and feminine and masculine within the divinity. There is another entire series of the Jewish Gospels. They're called Hebrew Gospels. And what is important to understand, that parting of ways between the Judaic Christianity and the Christianity as we know today did not happen until about 3rd century. So in the 2nd century, it still did not part ways with Judaism. So in the Hebrew Gospels, Christ and his teachings are examined and recorded within the context of Judaic religion. Then there is another series of Gospels that are extremely fascinating, and they're called infancy Gospels. This is the Proto-Gospel of James and infancy Gospels of Thomas. The Proto-Gospel of James looks at the topic of Mary's virginity, and the infancy Gospel of Thomas talks about Jesus being a child, and Jesus portrayed as a very mischievous child. He literally gets upset at somebody on the street and he kills that person. And when he's explained by his parents that was a bad thing to do, he resurrects the person. So, but it is truly fascinating. So all the mischief he gets into, and who he is as a child with all of the powers that he has not yet came to use. Now, the last gospel that I'll talk a little bit more about, and this is the gospel that we will examine in October, is the Gospel of Judas. This is one of the probably most fascinating gospels because it gives an entire new perspective on who Christ was and on the knowledge shared by him. I want to say a few words on how it was discovered. It was also quite a tragedy what happened to it. We have only one version of Gospel of Judas, just one copy. That's all that survived. It's believed that it was found somewhere in 70s. It did fell in the wrong hands. So whoever found realized the value of the script and basically was trying to extract the highest price possible for the script. The historians and academia knew it exists. No one could purchase it. Basically, no one was able or willing to pay the price of what the seller was asking. And because there were no buyers for that price, and I don't know what the price was, it ended up being kept in a various tough conditions that basically destroyed a large part of the gospel. And the last where it was found in 1983, it was kept in a security deposit box in Long Island, in some kind of a basement. So it was in a very humid conditions in a security box in the basement of some house in Long Island by the people who wanted to sell and extract the maximum revenue for the gospel. And as a result of it, big part of it got destroyed. And this is the only one that we have. So in 1983, it made its debut in National Geographic. It was purchased and it was part of the Codex Chapos. It's dated to the 2nd century. And the text was originally dated to the 2nd century. And there is a second confirmation of it is that it was mentioned by Erroneous in his writings in 180. So Erroneous knew of the Gospel of Judas, and he was refuting Gospel of Judas, and that's dated in 180s. So when the text was dated about the same time, so this is the original text that was also refuted by Erroneous. And what the Gospel of Judas talk, we will cover later. But now, to close this talk, I just want to list a few of the principal beliefs, principal sayings of the Gnostics that they left us. I would like to call it more of a food for thought. One of the things that repeated throughout the Gospels is notion that the hidden will be seen. They always write about something hidden that will be seen. And the understanding that the student gives to that is as above, so below. That what is hidden above is seen below. That if we just learn to project and see more than our limited version of this erroneous material reality, we'll be able to comprehend the entirety. So what is hidden will be seen by those who can see, basically. The second one that is repeated throughout Gospels is the kingdom is spread out on earth and can be seen by those who can. So the pleroma, the divine realm, is spread out everywhere. That earth does not exist outside of it, but it is our erroneous nature being born from Yaldabaoth precludes us from seeing it. And that's why Christ was sent to open our eyes so we can see this kingdom here. The kingdom is spread out on earth for those who can see. The third one that is quite interesting, it says, you stand in the place that you can reach. That it is your understanding that guides as far as we can go. That once we have gnosis and once we open our senses, we can reach much further. That we stand in the place that we can reach. And if we're not happy with where we are, well, we reach it because that's our limitation of the mind. That once you open the limitations of the mind, you can reach other places. You can stand in other realities. The other saying that is a theme, the kingdom is inside and outside. So the kingdom of God, the divine, is not only outside, it's inside. And if we understand our own nature and work with it, we can comprehend the nature of divine outside. It is both. The Son of Man being within. And again, this is the resonance with the theosophical notion of that we are divine. The Son of Man being is within. It is in us. It's not somewhere out there. It's in us. But because we are born of error, we refuse to see it. What you seek is within you. What you seek after is within you. That basically we are a mini universes of the entire pleroma, and we can find the entire existence within ourselves if we choose to see it. Then there is a very interesting statement. One can think for hours about it. It says, that which you have. That which you have will save you if you bring it forth from yourself. That which you have will save you if you bring it forth from yourself. So that sometimes they just say that which you have, and that which you have is the divinity, and it will save us if we bring it forth from within. It will not save us if we worship something outside. So that's a very common thought. And the last one that we've probably seen in many other schools of thoughts that theosophy encompasses is know thyself. As we know thyself, we know the mind of God. So we'll conclude here. I hope this was not too overwhelming, and we continue in October. Is there any questions?
Oh, wow. We got months of questions,
Okay.
but what you said is full of the three fundamentals. In virtually everything you said, in fact, everything you said. I can't think of anything that wasn't. But we need to try to keep in mind that we don't want to get overwhelmed in this season. We got to go through this to really understand what went on, what we have, what we're faced with today, and we'll move on. But everything boils down to one thing in theosophy: that's life, evolution of life, and that's what we're trying to do, is to evolve it in the right direction. And that was really helpful to me to realize that, yeah, we have to go through all the stuff, and all those words you put on the board is very important. But that's all we're doing is we're trying to get people to understand what is important and move on. And we have got so much of misinformation in the Gospels that you presented today, brings it out very clearly that we have to go back to the basics, and maybe not throw everything out. Certainly what we've learned about life, but pay attention to the bottom line again, and move forward again. So thank you very much for what you've done today, and how.
Thank you.
I will ask you. No? As I understand, this both is an error. Yeah, it means that we are an error too. At first, how do you have to have inside some divine if we are an error? And second question, maybe Christ is an error.
Okay, let's go back to this.
Yeah. Cool. Say that we are narrow and Christ is divine.
So there is invisible spirit and there is
Yeah.
barbelum.
Yeah.
And something born of them, born of divine emanation of feminine and masculine. He can be in error. He is born of the,
It's axioma.
yes. Now, we are in error.
Yeah.
But here is where the challenge is. Our mother, so proto-mother,
Yeah.
if you go with Gnostic,
Sophia.
is Sophia.
Yeah.
Sophia is not an error. Sophia is a pure emanation of invisible.
Mm.
She knows pleroma, she knows the divine.
That's the spark from the divine.
It is far from the divine. The challenge, she conceived the world without masculine invisible spirit. She conceived the world one-sided.
Oh.
So-
Not totally.
Yeah, actually, she didn't conceive the world. She conceived Yalda Boaz. And Yalda Boaz only has one side of the divine. It doesn't have other side of the divine. So he's not evil. He is in error. So he's almost like hopping on one foot. So when Yalda Boaz creates world in the image he knows, but he doesn't know the full image. That's the challenge. He doesn't know the full because he never known the spirit. He only knew Sophia. I'm not complicated. So he knows part of the divine through Sophia because she is a perfection of the invisible spirit. She's his emanation. But it's like a second grade, it's like second hand. The spirit itself did not participate.
You could take that idea all over the place. The one that popped into my head when you were talking, was we take the perfect and put it up there, and we separate that out from the imperfect.
Mm-hmm.
Christ as opposed to the devil.
Yes.
We don't want to talk about the devil, but the devil is needed to help us along. And that's the kind of stuff you were, I think, we're putting on board, because we are trying to lead ourselves, and by leading ourselves, leading others to perfection, which is good. And that's what we need to do. But we need to also pay attention to that one-sidedness too.
Yes, yeah. And when I look at this, maybe that was the Gnostic attempt to explain how could we go so wrong? Because we were created by divine, how could we go so wrong? There must be some error. But what they do much nicer, they don't create the devil, who's evil. They create an error. There's basically a system in the script. There is a computer program and there is an error. It's not good or it's bad. It's not necessarily dualistic. It's not evil. It's an error. And one needs to correct the error. So, and because we are in the program of the error, we don't see the error. So that's why Christ is sent to tell us you're functioning in the error. It needs to be fixed.
Well, we're not thinking that error still, because that was all the stuff you talking about today was discovered in the mid-1940s. That was a long time ago.
2,000 years.
In our current,
Yeah.
I mean, that was most of my life, even my life. And
But now you can see it once you've heard all of this. Why this have to be eliminated? It goes against the imagined God itself.
yeah,
The God of the Judaic religion, of Christian religion, suddenly is Yaldabaoth, who is an error.
yeah. And then we put Jesus on the cross, and okay, we hung him on the cross for our sins and all this stuff.
Yeah.
It goes us right back on our tangent.
Yeah. And this brings back to our responsibility of find the error and fix the error.
And
So unless we fix it,
it's theosophists. We believe that Jesus was an example of what we can become. He is an older brother.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's I can understand it that way. But,
Mhm.
and, you know, these typical Christian, even the most intelligent ones, have been so indoctrinated with all this stuff that's going on until it's going to take a lot of work
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
just to unlearn
Yes.
what got learned.
Yes.
And that's not to say anything against the modern Christians in terms of one Charles Stanley, who recently died. I have a lot of respect for him. He is trying to help us in the right direction. But he said one day, I don't know about reincarnation. He says, there's no reincarnation. Well, even science is now saying, but this Christianity is what is this idea that the reincarnation doesn't exist? You got to even train the ones that are the leaders in that respect.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But one thing about getting older is you want to say things and you can't say them. Yeah, I think most people are. I was like that all my life, but now it's gotten more so, and you got to try to keep it simple, which keep that in there with you too. We have a lot of learning to do, a lot of unlearning to do. And this is the process I see of the unlearning process.
This sounds simple, but it took me 6 months of studying. 6 months. Yeah, to get to the simple.
Yeah.
I have again question. Humanity exists approximately 40,000 years. Approximately, yeah. Grace appeared only 2,000 years ago. Why is this divine waited so long time to send us Christ? And what humanity did all this period, all these thousands years without him.
Well, there were other divine beings, the other masters.
Others.
Yeah. This is the one that we're looking now. There were, of course, other masters all along.
It might be with us now, we don't know.
Yeah, that's right.
We're just looking at this period of history and our Western culture.
Yeah. Because, it said that, and I think there's a branch of Christianity that says this too, that one of these days, the line will lay down with the lamb. In other words, everyone will be perfect. I think in theory, I understand that.
Yeah.
But I think we got millions of years. And the whole idea is there's no beginning, there's no end, there's continuous evolution. So we're continuing to we're tending to learn ourselves as we go. Even when we become perfected, I think there's levels of that. So the idea is maybe we're just trying to get away from this idea of beginning and ending, because there is an ending.
Yeah, 2,000 years is a short period compared to 40,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, really. Maybe after 10,000 years, we'll be better.
Yeah.
Maybe.
But also another thought on Christ coming 2,000 years, because 2,000 years ago, after Christ, this is where we're also starting to perfect our weapons and going into a more mass destruction.
Yeah.
And before that, we could not inflict such mass destruction.
Yeah. We have really gotten away out of the completely out of the idea. For example, what is it? I can't even think of the word right now. There's 12 of those, these signs of the zodiac. That's what a fortune teller does. That is a typical thought on the street. That is really important stuff. And the ancients, the masters that are with us today, can look up and read the stars and tell us what's going to happen tomorrow.
Which cycle we're going into.
We've completely lost that.
And you can see also in this Gnostic theology, it's extremely complex, and we don't really know many authors. We have no idea who were we know few minds who were philosophers who were left some writings, but we don't really know. It's fairly complex just for not to have some major masters behind it. But Simon Magus is the main one and Simon Magus, basically, he is been followed by many esoteric Christian movements in Europe.
Simon Magus is a really, he's the one that said that we're down to find this dog as lost sheep.
Yeah.
And that's what we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be out there trying to help people, but he got really blasted in history.
Yes. Yeah.
So, but we got a lot to get back to.
Yeah. Lots of one day all invisible will be seen.
Thank you very much, and we're looking forward to the next talk on the subject. I don't know what. Come on, people out there on the.
See some people. Yeah.
We gotta get going, but we didn't hear from anybody up there. I think we'll give them one more time.
Yeah. Yes, everyone is here. So we have an online talk next Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely. And then after this talk, this is not gonna be online. We recorded, but we will be having this continuing our study of the Bhagavad Gita.
Yes.
So those who are in that, those who are with us out there online, please stay with us if you want to continue that, because you're not going to be able to see that online.
Yeah, we can take like 5-minute break and continue with
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Okay.
But we'll be-
Let's say 5 to 10.